a high-tech train glides into Wolfsburg, a city built around a huge Volkswagen factory and a symbol of German industrial success since the war. But now executives at Volkswagen and other German businesses face a crisis. And it comes from the factories and railway lines of over 50 years ago. It was by rail that the Nazis transported millions of victims around their empire. They were traveling to immediate death or slave labor in factories, some of them run by companies which still exist today. Ronald Leeton was rounded up for slave labor with his father and other Polish Jews. He was 12 years old.
They've loaded us up, between 80 and 100 people, to a cattle truck. The train proceeded very slowly and it stopped in Auschwitz. At that time, Auschwitz was getting very large number of Jews from Hungary. The transports came at the rate of 6,000 per day. They couldn't cope with us. After about 2 days of standing in a side ramp, we were taken further.
Ronald Leeton was becoming part of a highly organized system which supplied German companies with slave labor.
The SS effectively sold their labor to German industry. Factories were established adjacent to many concentration camps, or the SS built concentration camps in the neighborhood of factories so that they could more easily move workers into factories and out again. They were unskilled workers, they were replaceable, there was seemingly inexhaustible reservoir of human material. The conditions in which they were working were atrocious, and thousands of them perished.
Ronald Leeton was taken to a factory in Austria.
I knew what dangers there were. If you didn't perform what you were supposed to perform, you were reported to the capo, who subsequently reported you to the capo in the camp, and you were dealt with properly.
What does dealt with mean?
Beaten up. They didn't kill anybody. And beating up usually led to these, I don't know how it's called in English, but this swelling of the legs, or swelling of the head. And this was one of the main causes of death.
Of those who arrived as slave laborers in autumn 1944, Ronald Leeton believes only 10% survived the beatings, malnutrition and disease. Ronald's father did not.
At the beginning of December 44, my father, he had flu, which developed into pneumonia. And I remember one day I told my father that it was Hanukkah, which means the Jewish festival of lights. Now, how I knew, I cannot comprehend to this very day. I call it my personal miracle of the festival of lights. My father was aware because he squeezed my hand as though he understood what I have said. He died a few hours later.
At the Nuremberg trials after the war, directors of several leading companies were sentenced to jail terms. But Britain and America wanted a strong Germany as an ally against Russia. So the industrialists went back to their businesses, and the businesses rose quickly from the ashes of the war.
Parts of German industry were flattened by Allied bombing and by the fighting over the Third Reich in the last months of the war, particularly in the area of the Ruhr. But other sectors of German industry emerged from the war only lightly damaged, partly because of a very efficient policy of breaking up large plant and dispersing them. So the so-called economic miracle, the Wirtschaftswunder, is not such an economic miracle. German industry was not rebuilt from scratch in what's sometimes called Year Zero, 1945. There was still a basic infrastructure. The plant was there, albeit scattered over the Reich in small units.
Most of Germany's best-known companies were rebuilt in the post-war years. And the issue of compensating former slaves has fallen to a new generation of industrial leaders.
I do think it's a very serious problem, and this is why we need a very fast solution, a fast and comprehensive solution. Not only because of us, the German companies, but also because of the people involved. I mean, those people who had to work as forced labor, they are very old at the moment, and the longer you wait with something, the less it will be efficient for them.
But the problem is complex. As well as the slaves from concentration camps, there were millions of laborers from Eastern Europe forced to work for German companies, but not actually imprisoned. And their working conditions varied enormously.
At the height of the war, there were 7 million foreign workers in Germany. Now, not all of them were forced laborers and slave laborers, and certainly not all of those are alive today. But we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine, White Russia, Belarus, Russia, Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia today. Hundreds of thousands of people who, during the Second World War, were forcibly taken from their families, from their homes, from their education, forced to work in the Third Reich under terrible conditions. Those who were Jews, who worked under the worst conditions of all, number also in the many tens of thousands.
So great is the number of people with a potential claim for compensation that some business leaders worry about the financial impact on German companies.
I think they'd be unable to pay such amounts of money for fear that the companies would go bankrupt. If you consider the fact that there were some 7 to 10 million slave workers during the war in Germany or the occupied territories, and if you consider the fact that some of them have died, but their families inherit the claim, so to speak, and if you then add to this the fact that all of this happened between 1939 and 1945, which means some 55 years ago, you would arrive at such stupendous amounts which would threaten the very existence of companies.
In the years since the war, documents have been found in European archives which reveal the extent to which German industry exploited forced labor. And it's remarkable how many of the powerful German companies of today were big businesses during the war. Companies like Volkswagen, Daimler-Benz and Siemens all used forced labor. Now these huge companies are finding that the events of over 50 years ago pose a threat to their modern businesses. And that threat looms largest in America. In the age of global business, America is a vital market for German companies. Daimler-Benz, makers of Mercedes, has just linked up with the US car giant Chrysler. Many other German companies have huge American operations, and they all witnessed the public relations disaster suffered by the Swiss banks, whose long battle over claims from the Holocaust years ended with the threat of sanctions against them in many American states. Now, Deutsche Bank's proposed merger with Bankers Trust has run into opposition, and German companies have learned from the Swiss experience that they mustn't underestimate the power of well-organized lobby groups.
At the end of the day, I have